Love that intro. Good evening, Canada. How you doing? My name is Tyler Bieber, the host of Rouge Radio, and we got a big one for you tonight here on the CFL episode here. Mike Reilly, quarterback of the Edmonton Eskimos, is going to join just a few seconds here. He was traded from the BC Lions to the Edmonton Eskimos this past January in exchange for 2 second-round draft picks. The Eskimos also received a second-round pick from the BC Lions in that deal. Undrafted in the NFL 2009, he spent time with the Steelers, the Packers, the Rams, and the Seahawks all down south. Was, of course, a member of the BC Lions, as mentioned, from 2010 to 2012. He was a member of the Cup Championship there in 2011. Tried out for the Jacksonville Jaguars this past offseason, but ultimately stayed up here in Canada with the Edmonton Eskimos, and we're going to bring him in here. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
I'm doing quite well. So as I was mentioning to the listeners here, you moved from the BC Lions to the Edmonton Eskimos, and it's a process of switching teams. And you likely knew it was coming. You showed your stuff with the Lions past couple of years, but prior to this season. And what sorts of things have you done or did you do in the offseason to help prepare yourself to come into the 2013 season here and ultimately compete for the starting job, which you did win?
You know, it's definitely a long off season when you're transitioning to a new team. I ended up signing, I think it was like the first part of February with Edmonton. And at that point, especially being a quarterback, it's a little bit different position than most other positions on a football team, where you really have to have the trust of your players around you on the team, and you have to be in a leadership type role if you're going to be successful. So for me, the off season, the biggest thing was to get acclimated to the city of Edmonton, get to know the fan base, and then also get to know what players were in town, and just make sure that when training camp started, I was no longer kind of the new guy in the room, but just one of the teammates, one of the guys that people were comfortable with. So I spent a ton of time in Edmonton in the off season, just getting to know everybody and making sure that people were familiar with me before that training camp started.
So in training camp, you competed with Matt Nichols, Kerry Joseph is there, Jonathan Crompton. It was supposedly down to you and Matt Nichols. He ultimately tore his ACL. You were named the starter. What sort of things has Matt done to help you during his rehab, or even what you have done to help him, whether it's advice or words of encouragement to help him out dealing with a couple of injuries that he has had? Last season, he got hurt in the Eastern semifinal game, and of course, the torn ACL in the preseason.
Yeah, Matt's a great player, and he's a guy that I've known for quite a while. We have a pretty good history. He played at Eastern Washington. I played at Central Washington. We played against each other one game in our careers, and we were coached by some of the same coaching staff. So I graduated a year before he did, and we both played in the East-West Shrine game. So he contacted me about that game back in 2009. So we do have a pretty good history between us. His injury situations that he's had in the last couple of years have been really unfortunate. And those are things that are difficult for any player, especially a guy like Matt, who hasn't really had to deal with injuries throughout his career up until this point. But he's had a good positive attitude about it. He's a guy that's really well liked in the locker room. He's a similar quarterback to me in the sense that he likes to be in the film room a lot. He likes to understand the game from a mental aspect. So as often as he's been able to, he's been in the meeting rooms with us during the game planning process. And he's been a good guy to be able to bounce ideas off of, and he really has stayed engaged with this offense throughout his rehab time. So, you never want to see a teammate go down like that, but for a guy like Matt, he's battled through it. He's rehabbed well during the season, and, he's a guy that's going to continue to fight no matter what adversity he faces. So he's been a great teammate to have, and, just been able to see him every day. We've kept in good contact, and, I'm sure during this off season as well, there's going to be different things that come up for him, trying to get back healthy and trying to deal with the off season. But, we'll keep in contact during that time as well.
So obviously the quarterback, you have to earn the completion from a receiver catching the ball at a touchdown or something like that. You don't throw to yourself. Talk about your receivers. I mean, you have Fred Stamps, Adarius Bowman's back from injury, and during his time back from injury, had he played a full season, it would work out that his yards per game would actually lead the league right now, which is incredible. James is there, Nate Kuhorn, Kerry Koch is injured right now, Matt Carter, you got some great depth there. Just talk about the receivers and how they have helped you progress over the course of the season as you started out in year one here with the Edmonton Eskimos.
Yeah, we have a great crew. We got a really good group of guys that come to work every day and work hard. Going into the season, we were fairly inexperienced at the position outside of Fred Stantz. We had guys that were pretty young in their careers. And I think this season, one of the great upsides to the season has been the maturity that we've seen throughout the entire wide receiver group. The unfortunate thing is with all the talent that we've had, we haven't really been able to have all those guys on the field at the same time. We spent the early part of the season with Fred trying to work through some injuries that he incurred during training camp. He missed a game early in the year. Kerry Koch was a guy that we were moving around all over the field. He was playing all the different positions, both to the field side and the boundary, and we weren't really sure exactly where he fit in the offense. We just knew that he was a really good talent. So we finally found the position that was right for him, playing in the boundary alongside of Fred Stantz. Once we made that move, things really started to click. You could see that in the Toronto game in Toronto. Those guys were finally feeling very comfortable at the positions. All the 5 wide receivers that were on the field, were very comfortable within their roles, and that's kind of really when you saw Shamad really step his game up. Nate Kuhorn early in the year, when we were struggling a little bit to try to find where everybody was going to fit in, he was playing his position to the wide side of the field that he was comfortable at and was having a really good start to the season. So the unfortunate part is that when we did get Adarius Bowman back in that same game against Calgary, we lost Kerry Koch, and that's really tough to replace. Not only is Kerry a great player on the physical level and can make good plays, but mentally he's very sharp. He knows where everybody needs to be at, and he was kind of the glue that held that position together a little bit. So to lose him was really difficult. Marcus Henry is also having a really good year, and then we lost him. He's got big playmaking ability. At various points in the season, and you could see that when we had a ton of success in the passing game, those guys were making great plays. And, I think that's the positive of this season is that they really have come to understand what they're capable of. They've gotten a really good comfort level with me. And I'm looking forward to next season when we have those guys healthy, when we have Adarius and Fred and Kerry and all those guys on the field at the same time, and they've had this year to look back on and realize what they're capable of. I think the sky's the limit for that group of guys. They really do have a tremendous amount of ability.
We mentioned the weapons, and I mean, you look at the Edmonton Eskimos and your record, and you have 3 wins, but I think for a large part, from the outside perspective, is you look at that record, and a lot of people look at it and say, well, they have 3 wins. Who do they have that's talented and stuff like that? And I mean, the wealth of talent that you actually have is just incredible to me. And that sort of transitions into my next question here. And I'm curious to know what goes through the mindset of a football player in these close losses that you guys have had this season. I mean, you look back at the scores in the schedule all the way back to week 1, and you see so many games that you guys could have won had a couple more things gone your way. So after the game on Saturday, when the season's over, unfortunately for you guys, after the game against Saskatchewan, are you going to look back and point out a couple games and say a couple more breaks there, a couple more plays, and we're a playoff team, or do you tend not to look at that just because you might think a little too much about it?
Well, I think this season, we do have a talented group of guys. We have good players. As I said, the experience level was not that high coming into the season, and now, although our win-loss record has not been what we wanted it to be, the amount of experience that we've gained, I think, is going to really pay off in the long run. But, certainly the season could have gone a different way. I truly believe that momentum is a huge part of football, and when you start to lose close games, it's hard to get that turned around. You almost you try to fight it as much as you can, but subconsciously your team maybe gets used to losing those close games, and then when it does hit that time when a game is close, you're like, man, what crazy, terrible break are we going to get this time that's going to prevent us from winning? And you try to fight that as much as you can, but that Montreal game at the early part of the season that we lost differently and we were able to punch it in the end zone, we could be looking at a totally different season. But with that being said, as a professional football team and as professional football players, you've got to find a way to fight through that. You've got to find a way to let those go. And we can't fool ourselves and say, oh, man, if we got one or two plays differently here, we'd be a Grey Cup championship team. The reality is that right now we're 3-14, and we got a lot of work to do. This offseason cannot be spent going, well, we were right there, just a couple of different breaks, and we'd be a much better team. We can't look at it that way. We have to realize that if we want to get to the Grey Cup, which is our ultimate goal, next season, we're going to have to make some serious changes in how we approach games, and we need to get a lot better. And, I think we're certainly capable of that. We showed that in flashes this year. But we do have to have a great offseason. We need to really work hard and not let those sit time. We have to take advantage of it. And we got to come back with a different mindset in 2014. And when it comes down to the wire games, we got to be willing to do whatever it takes to get those wins. And I think, like I said, we're capable of that, but time will tell.
I kind of compare it to a situation in 2010 with the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. They set an all-time record for close losses, and while you guys haven't quite reached the number that they did, they were able to parlay the hard-fought games, the experience into a huge following season. As you very well know, you were a member of the BC Lions that beat them in the Grey Cup in 2011. So you mentioned off-season here, and you're heading into it coming up here in the next week after the game on Saturday. What kind of things are you going to do maybe differently from what you did before this season to help you as you transition from a 18-game regular season into an off-season and then ultimately heading in for the first time in your professional career into a year in which you will be the starting quarterback in training camp?
It's now I have 18 games. I got 18 games of film that I can really break down in the off season, and I can take a look and say, okay, these are the things that I personally need to improve on, and these are the things that our offense needs to improve on if we're going to be successful. I got tremendous faith in our defense that they're going to do whatever it takes next year. So I'm not worried about that side of the ball, but I'm worried about what I can control. And that's the offense and my own personal play. And like I say, going into last offseason, I didn't have a ton of starts and a ton of game tape under my belt. I knew there were things that I was going to have to improve on. But until you get on the field and you play in the games, you really don't know. It's just kind of a guessing game, and you're just trying to work on everything. But, this next 6 months, I got 18 games of tape, and I'm going to be able to sit down and watch against different styles of defenses, see how other teams played that were successful against those defenses, and really ultimately what my shortcomings are and what I need to improve on, because I feel like I've done some, but there's also been a lot of things that I would like to do better, that I need to get better at, and I'm going to do whatever that takes this offseason. I'm going to spend some time working with my wide receivers in different parts of the country, back to Edmonton, on our own personal time to get some work together as a group, as a whole. And that's just really the key, is to not let a bunch of rust build up over the 6 months, because everybody's going to take some time off. You got to let your body heal up. But ultimately, I'm going to spend that 6 months doing whatever it takes to get better. And I got contacts. I got people that have played this game in the past that I'll sit down and watch the tape with. And, I'll get some other eyes on my film and really try to break down and be as critical as I can, because, you can look at the positives, but you're really not going to learn much from that. It's the things that you screw up on that you can get better at, and that's my mentality.
So the last part here before I let you go, Mike, I wrote down 6 names and they're in front of me here, and I'm gonna talk to you about names, and I just want you to let me know what they may have done to help further your football career, or for the first 3 names on this list here, any advice or wisdom that they may have given you that you still hold in the back of your mind. So the first one is Pittsburgh Steelers, and starting quarterback there is Ben Roethlisberger. What did he do, if anything, for you when you were there?
I had a great time in Pittsburgh. They were just coming off the Super Bowl win, so I got to play alongside of some of the best names in football. The defense that I was playing against every day of practice was the best in the league. So those were the best defensive players in the world. So I learned a lot from that. But watching Ben when I was there, I realized a couple of things. First, how, I guess, when you extend the play as a quarterback, how beneficial that is to your offense. I mean, he's one of the best ever at extending a play when you think you got him sacked. He can get out of the pocket. He's not necessarily taking off and gaining big chunks of yards running the ball, but he's keeping his eyes downfield and throwing the ball to his receivers and giving them an opportunity to make plays. And I think that that's a fairly big part of my game as well. Some of the bigger plays that me and Freddie and Darius earlier in the year have made have come off broken plays where you're just going to keep your eyes downfield and really give those guys an opportunity. So that was one of the things that I saw Ben do, and I kind of realized how important that is to being successful.
I was looking at the list when I was making it up here, and Ben Roethlisberger was the first one that came to my mind that compared to you. So your explanation there tied right in with that. Second up on the list here, Green Bay Packers starting quarterback Aaron Rodgers.
Oh, Aaron's one of the guys that I respect the most in terms of football. When I went in there, he had established himself as the guy in Green Bay. He was a couple years removed from the whole Brett Favre situation, but just from him, I learned how to carry yourself as a pro. I mean, the guy, he signed one of the bigger contracts in the NFL at the time. When I was there back in 2010, he was still very highly paid. And he was in a small city of Green Bay where he was very well known. But he didn't shy away from the public. He would go out to the movies, go out into town, and just sit down and talk to people as if, they were having a normal conversation. And he was a guy that really didn't let his ego get in the way. He came to work. He was the first one in and the last one to leave every morning, and just spent a ton of time and had a lot of pride on his craft. And he did everything perfectly. You watched him during practice. His footwork, his eyes, his reads, his progressions, everything was picture perfect every single day. The guy never took a day off. And I think that's why, in my opinion, he's the best quarterback in the NFL. It doesn't just happen overnight. You've got to work at it. And he certainly put the time and the work in. And so that's a guy that you definitely look up to.
Next up on the list, you were there for the tail end of what was a 1-15 season, and St. Louis Rams, Mark Bolger.
Yeah, that was a tough year. I came in for the last 4 weeks of that season. And it was a similar situation here. They knew they were out of the playoffs. For Mark, he was injured. So it was tough for him because he was watching a team that was his team, that he was the starting quarterback for, and he was helpless, man. He couldn't play. He couldn't get out on the field and do anything to help. But he was a guy that still stuck around. He was in the office every day. He was trying to help out the other guys as much as he could. So, that was a tough situation, and that's kind of where you learn how difficult injuries are. And one injury to a key player on your team can change things tremendously. So, that was a tough year to be on that team when they were finishing up and going through that. But, as I say, you learn the most through adversity, and so there was a lot to be learned from that as well.
So we'll switch back to the CFL here, and BC Lions starting quarterback, and the guy that you backed up in BC, Travis Lulay.
Travis is one of my best friends. He's a guy that I got to know really well when I was in BC, and he's a guy that I have tremendous simply because his story is very similar to mine in terms of bouncing around the NFL and then going to BC. When he was in BC, he was coming in as a four-string guy into training camp. Nobody was really giving him a second thought, but he knew what he was capable of. And when I first got there in 2010, I believe, they were not playing real great football over in BC. They were bouncing around between Travis, Jarius Jackson, and Casey Printers being the starting guy. There was a couple weeks Travis was starting, and then he got pulled. He was getting pulled halfway through games. Just things weren't going real well. They had the talent there, but they just had to get through some growing pains. And he was a guy that never gave up. Knew what he was capable of and just came to work every single day. And he's another guy with tremendous work ethic, and it's paid off. A lot of people love Travis Lulay over in Vancouver, but it wasn't always that way. When he was first starting out, they weren't having a lot of success, and there was talk of him never, was never going to be the guy. Wasn't a franchise-type quarterback, but, he knew what he was capable of, and ultimately that hard work paid off. He was able to show it. And now there's no question who the guy is in Vancouver and who that franchise is built around. So it's a tribute to his hard work, and it just shows what you can make of things, even when they're not looking great at the beginning.
Next up on my list is your former head coach and GM in BC, Wally Buono.
Wally, I really like Wally, but Wally's a different guy. He's a guy that it takes a while to crack through his barrier and get to know him real well. And when I first got there, I didn't know Wally all that well, and I just kind of always thought he was a little bit crazy. It took me a while to realize that there's a method to his madness, and I have tremendous respect for Wally because, I watched in that 2011 season when we started 0-5. I watched the fans at Empire kind of turn on us for the most part. We always had our loyal fans that believed, but there was a lot of people in that stadium that were booing us off the field every single game. There was a lot of people in the media and in the fan base calling for Wally's head, telling him, saying that as the GM he should fire himself as the head coach, and calling for David Reilly to fire Wally. Wally stuck to his guns. He knew what the team was capable of. He never wavered with Travis as a starting quarterback, and obviously the record speaks for itself. It paid off. We won the Grey Cup that year, and Wally's a guy that when he knows something's right, he's going to stick to it regardless of what other people's opinions are. And so you definitely have to respect that.
And finally on the list, we'll stick with one of your teammates here, and that is the veteran experience behind you at quarterback, and that is Kory Joseph.
Kory's a great teammate. He's a guy that's been in this league for a long time and been a professional football player for even longer. And he has a lot of experience. There's not much that a team's going to show that Kory hasn't seen. So to be able to have him in the film room every day, trying to help me out as much as he can, just talking about reads and even during the game coming off on the sidelines and having a guy there that's, going to listen to you and give you some input and everything like that, that's a tremendous benefit to have. You don't feel like you're alone out there. It's, you have your coaches, but coaches are always different than players. And, you can always talk to players a little bit differently. You can always voice your concerns a little bit differently. So, it's been a long season for all of us. And Kory, unfortunately, he's taken some blame for certain things in the media over the last couple of years. And I can just tell you that when I look at Kory, he's a guy that comes in and works hard every single day. Every morning I come in super early to watch film, and he's already in the film room studying things and trying to help me through my reads and stuff. So, he's a guy that I'll always be definitely grateful for having him this year and for the help he's been able to provide me. And I got a lot of respect for Kory Joseph as well.
Mike, I know the season hasn't gone the way that you would have hoped for, and that is, of course, being in Regina, not just this Saturday, but in the next month as well. I appreciate you taking time to join me tonight.
Hey, thanks for having me on. Always a pleasure. Have a good evening, all right?
You too, thanks. Edmonton Eskimos quarterback Mike Reilly here on Rouge Radio. Great stuff from him, a very well-spoken athlete and man. Just tremendous conversation with him. I hope you enjoyed that. So, we've got a few things to take care of here as I sped through the intro there, just to get some more time with Mike on the air. First up here, the Canadian Football Hall of Fame. They're holding the first ever Hall of Fame party, and that's going to be at the Grey Cup here in Regina, Friday, November 22nd. You buy a $100 ticket. It includes hors d'oeuvres, and there's an open bar. Open bar. Guys, open bar. Did you hear that? What more do you need? Also, a roster of Hall of Fame players that are going to be around that you can chat with. You got here's the list here, the partial list. This isn't the full list. It's not just these guys. There will be more. Don Narcisse, Bobby Jurison, Dave Cutler, Gord Curry, George Reed, Roger Aldegg, Damon Allen, Ron Este. Those are the guys that I have on this list right now. There will be more. It's at the Travel Lodge in Regina. As I mentioned, tickets are $100. It's going to be a great time. I will be there. Obviously, I can in no way, shape, or form talk you out the way that one of these great Hall of Famers will, but if you want to talk about the CFL, I would be more than happy to do that with you. So maybe we'll see you there. I don't see why you wouldn't want to buy a ticket. It's going to be a great evening there. Again, that's Canadian Football Hall of Fame party, Friday, November 22nd at the Travelodge, Cumberland Hall in Regina, the Friday of the Grey Cup weekend there. Just going to be a great time. So please check that out. More information at the Canadian Football Hall of Fame website. That's cfhof.ca. And at that same time, at that party, the 2014 induction will be announced, so you won't want to miss that either. Shout out to a network that I haven't really talked about in the past, and that is the Pennant Sportsnet. And it's streamed in the United States, and you log on there, psn247.com is the website, and they stream our shows every week. So shout out to them down there if you're listening to us via that way. And the podcast as well, you can check us out various networks. YouTube, we're up on there. TuneIn Radio, the world's radio. Download that on your Android, I believe. I'm not sure if it's on the iOS platform or not. You'll have to check that out, though. RougeRadio.com, check it out there. You can also call in at any time on the show here if you want. The number is 347-989-1127 if you want to talk to me or a guest. Obviously, I don't have a guest anymore, but why would you want to talk to me? I don't know. I'm pretty good to talk to, aren't I? Maybe. I don't know. Some people tell me, some people don't. Anyways, moving on. Week 18, kind of a, it's always tough at this time of year just because the playoffs are either just about done or almost done or are done. And after Week 18, they were done. Everything is set now. Started out first game of the week. The Toronto Argonauts beat the Winnipeg Blue Bombers 36-21 on Thursday. Argos looking up first place in the Eastern Division. On Friday, it was the BC Lions over the Edmonton Eskimos, 43-29, nothing to play for in that game on either side. But always interesting to see what happens with the players looking forward to next year, looking to see what happens down the road. Hamilton Tiger Cats over the Montreal Alouettes, 27-24. Hamilton clinching second place in the East Division and a home field berth. Kent Austin now 2-0 in his 2 seasons coaching in the CFL as a head coach in terms of gaining home field advantage. Of course, he did Saskatchewan Roughriders in 2007, locking up second place there before ultimately winning the Grey Cup in Toronto. And rounding out the week on Saturday night was the Calgary Stampeders, 29-25 victors over the Saskatchewan Roughriders. Lots of events in that game. I tell you, just craziness in that game, whether it's Kory Sheets, Kevin Glenn not having a great half being pulled, some debate about that, 2-point conversions going like they're going out of style. I'll dive into that game in a little bit here. Upcoming this week, Week 19, the final week of the season. There's nothing to play for in terms of the standings, but there's always great players, great plays to see in the Canadian Football League. Montreal will play at Toronto. Calgary will be at BC. Both those games are on Friday night. Hamilton is at Winnipeg, and Edmonton is at Saskatchewan. Both those games are on Saturday to round out the regular season, and then we move on to the playoffs. And that'll start November 10th, and it'll be the Hamilton Tiger Cats hosting the Montreal Alouettes. That game will go first, I believe. Don't quote me on this, but I believe kickoff there is 1:30 or 2 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'm not 100% sure on that, though. After that, the Saskatchewan Roughriders will host the British Columbia Lions in the Western Division semifinal. And Travis Lulay back at practice. Will he start that game? Who knows? It could be Buck Pierce. But Travis Lulay back at practice, trying to get back in game shape here. And he will be playing against the Calgary Stampeders on Friday night. Check that out. Going to try and get some game shape in him here as we roll and head on towards the playoffs. Players of the week, offensive, was Ricky Ray. Why not? Look, did you see that game Thursday against the Winnipeg Blue Bombers? Yeah, it was the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, but still, nobody's ever done this to the Blue Bombers this season. 39 of 45, including 21 straight completions at one point in this game. Second best all time. I believe first is Jason Moss, who is quarterback's coach. 505 yards, 3 touchdowns in the game. Just a masterful performance from Ricky Ray in that game in the win over the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. Defensively, it was Charleston Hughes. He had 5 tackles, 3 sacks in the win over the Saskatchewan Roughriders, just wreaking havoc on that Saskatchewan Roughriders offensive line, as did his bookend teammate Cordero Law, they just had a massive game, and they're up and over 30 sacks combined on the season. Just tremendous season from those two guys there in Calgary. Special teams, Brandon Banks, 210 return yards, including a huge game-changing 107 missed field goal return for a touchdown. And it was really weird because you don't expect a kicker to miss short from 42 yards, but that was the case with Sean White in that game, the Montreal Alouettes kicker. He missed short from 42 yards. It wasn't a great snap, maybe not the best hold, but it was still short from 42 yards, and it's something that you never really see. But Brandon Banks picked up that ball and took it the entire way. Huge play in that game, and the Canadian of the Week seems to be every single week almost, in fact. And no doubt the most outstanding Canadian in the 2013 season he will be. And that is, of course, John Cornish, who had 20 carries for 109 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 receptions for 12 yards in the win over the Saskatchewan Roughriders. And that touchdown, did you see that game? Did you see his touchdown? He was tackled initially at, I believe, about 3 or 4 yard line, but he powered his way into the end zone for the go-ahead touchdown as Calgary came out on top there. Other things, news-wise, in the Canadian Football League, player team awards were announced. I'm not going to run through the entire list just because there's 6 times 8. Simple math says 48 players. That's quite a bit of time. I'll break that down maybe next week. We'll also have a playoff preview next week after the regular season ends. But a couple notable things here from the player awards that are going to be handed out at the Grey Cup in November. 8 teams represent 6 players, so 1 player wins from each division. So BC, Calgary, Edmonton, Saskatchewan would send 1 player. Toronto, Montreal, Hamilton would send 1 player in every category. Those categories, of course, refreshing your memory: most outstanding player, most outstanding defensive player, most outstanding Canadian, most outstanding offensive lineman, special teams player, and rookie. Couple things here. Calgary in the West. I mean, they have the best record in the league. They have the best record in the West. They might sweep the entire West in the awards. Most outstanding player is going to come down to John Cornish and Kory Sheets. My vote would go to John Cornish. It's a debate there. I think Cornish is starting to slip away from Sheets, though. Sheets was, of course, injured throughout the season. Cornish was as well, but he didn't miss as much time, so that is aided in his case for the nomination. But he also has less carries than Kory Sheets and has tons of more yards. Defensively, Charleston Hughes, I think, will be the nominee for the West Division. He, of course, does play for the Calgary Stampeders. Adam Bighill, Marcus Howard, and Tyrone Brackenridge for the Lions, Eskimos, and Roughriders are the other nominees there. I don't see anybody really challenging them in that category. Canadian John Cornish, as I mentioned, he's basically got it locked up. I mean, nobody compares to the season that he has had. Offensive lineman Stanley Bryant for the Calgary Stampeders in that one. That'll be an interesting one. That'll probably be the closest it gets in terms of voting, because the other 3 nominees, you have Jovan Olafioye of the BC Lions, outstanding right tackle there for that team. Brendan Labatt, the great left guard for the Saskatchewan Roughriders. The other nominee is Edmonton Eskimos Matthew O'Donnell, who has had a fine season himself. I don't think on the level of Olafioye and Labatt or Bryant, but still a nice season there for him, and the best of what had been a struggling offensive line in Edmonton for a large part of the season this year in 2013. Special teams, Rene Paredes, slam dunk for him. I mean, the guy's just crazy. He's only a few kicks away from the all-time record. He's going to need, I think, 8 to break it, which is unlikely to happen, but you never know. And then the rookie, Brett Jones. I don't think anybody's going to really challenge him here, because the other nominees are Seydou Junior Haydea of the BC Lions, who, by the way, was the draft pick this year, 2013, that the BC Lions used in that Mike Reilly trade. Edmonton themselves took Stephen Charles in that trade. They traded up with the Hamilton Tiger Cats, and another time they traded the pick from the BC Lions to get Stephen Charles. And interesting note about him, he signed with the practice roster of the Tennessee Titans, but earlier today the Buffalo Bills signed Stephen Charles off the practice roster of the Tennessee Titans. And so when that happens, it's just like the CFL. If a team picks a guy off another team's practice roster, they have to take that guy. He obviously transfers over to the other team unless the other team decides to put him on their active roster. If he doesn't go on that other team's active roster, his original team, He does transfer over to the new team, and then they have to put him on the active roster. So Stephen Charles goes from the practice squad in Tennessee to earning an actual game check now with the Buffalo Bills, as he has to be placed on the 53-man roster, so that's good for him as well. The other note, just mentioning here, the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, obviously they've had a really tough season, 3-14 record, and it shows with their nominees. The most outstanding player, defensive player, and Canadian player is all one guy, and I bet you can guess who it is. It's Enoch Muamba. He received 3 awards. How crazy is that? Other nominees for the most outstanding player, Toronto, Ricky Ray, Montreal, Chip Cox, who is also their nominee for Defensive Player of the Year, and the Hamilton Tiger Cats, Henry Burris. Going to be interesting to see who comes out on top there. My pick would be Ricky Ray, but like Sheets, he missed a lot of time, so he might get knocked for that. The sleeper, I would say, would be Chip Cox. He has had a fantastic season for that Montreal Alouettes defense, and that defense is the only reason they have a chance here to maybe make some noise in the playoffs if they can get some sort of stability, some sort of consistency out of the quarterback position, out of that offense, as you roll on here, heading into Hamilton in a couple of weeks, next weekend actually, for the playoffs. So, back to Week 18 here, and we're going to focus in on that Calgary-Saskatchewan game just because it was really the only game that, at the end of the day, meant the most. I mean, Montreal-Hamilton was still big in its own right, but Calgary-Saskatchewan was the big one. So, a crazy first half. I mean, Saskatchewan just pummeled the Calgary Stampeders offensive line. Kevin Glenn struggled under the pressure. He was 11 of 17 for 120 yards. He had a touchdown and an interception in the first half. John Hufnagel pulled him in favor of Drew Tate, not Bo Levi Mitchell, Drew Tate. Drew Tate went 11 of 16 in the second half for 181 yards. After the game and moving forward, John Hufnagel said that Kevin Glenn is still the starter until he says otherwise. The next meaningful game isn't until November 17th, so who knows what's going to happen in that time frame. But I still don't see how you shy away from Kevin Glenn. I mean, the guy's led you to where you are today. He led you to where you were last year, and that was the group against the Toronto Argonauts. Ultimately a loss, but he still got you there. So I don't see how you would want to go away from Kevin Glenn. He generally bounces back very well from a struggle, as he did in the first half, so I don't think they'll be in any trouble with Kevin Glenn moving forward, and perhaps for a rematch against the Saskatchewan Roughriders on November 17th, but they will have to take care of business against the BC Lions on November 10th in the Western Division semifinal. So, Kory Sheets, if you saw the game, there was a situation where Kevin Glenn was sacked. He fumbled the ball. It was a turnover for the Calgary Stampeders, and the Riders were set up first and goal at the Calgary 5-yard line. I believe it was Terrius George who recovered the fumble, if I am not mistaken in that regard. So, first and goal at the 5-yard line. And you have Kory Sheets in the backfield, right? And he's arguably the best running back in the game. Second in rushing right now. First down play. Durant is passing the football. It's incomplete. He had to throw it away because he couldn't find Scott McHenry, who was the intended target. Second down. Darian Durant sacked by the guy we mentioned earlier. Charleston Hughes' bookend partner, Cordero Law. So, a huge chance for the Saskatchewan Roughriders in that game to get a touchdown off of a turnover on a very short field, a 5-yard field, and they ran 2 plays and lost 8 yards. Now, when they got off the field, Kory Sheets was seen on the camera, TSN's camera on the sideline, yelling at offensive coordinator George Cortez. It's brought a huge debate out, whether it's on the message boards or on talk shows or anything like that, about Kory Sheets and his mentality and whether he's a selfish player and whatnot. But, I mean, here's the thing. If Darian Durant makes the throw to Scott McHenry, it's a touchdown. And nobody says anything because it's a touchdown. Kory Sheets isn't mad. George Cortez doesn't take heat. The Saskatchewan Roughriders score 6 points, kick the extra point, get the 7th point, and everything is okay with the Saskatchewan Roughriders and their offense. Now, granted, it wasn't the easiest throw for Darian Durant, but the time and the window was there to make the throw before the trailing defender. I don't recall who the defender was, but before that guy caught up to Scott McHenry to what would have been part of the heat that George Cortez takes. And it's not all on Darian Durant, but some of it has to go to him. And you look at his playing style, and I think at times he just doesn't make a decision quick enough. And it costs the team, like it did on that series. Didn't get the completion, then he takes a sack on the next play. Granted, it was a great pressure from Cordero Law, and there wasn't much that Darian Durant could do about it, but it still led to a sack. It led to a loss. They had to kick the field goal. But I think overall at times, especially in the second half of the season here, I mean, this is a guy who threw 21 touchdown passes and 1 interception in the first half of the season. Just gaudy numbers that you've never seen from Darian Durant before. And George Cortez at that point was hailed as some sort of genius. I mean, you take Darian Durant and you give him these kinds of stats. Yeah, that's going to look good on George Cortez. But now, as you shift towards the season and to the end of the season, and the Saskatchewan Roughriders have started to lose more games, what has happened? Darian Durant has struggled a little bit, and George Cortez is getting the blame, and Darian Durant's getting the blame. And it's the cycle of the game of professional sports that has happened here. You know, they're on the pedestal. They're on the top of the top. In the first half of the season, the Saskatchewan Roughriders are looking like they're going to blow the competition away. But then it comes right back down to it. It's a season. It's not a half season. It's not a quarter of a game. It's a season. And everybody's always quick to point out, look at that team. Look how good they're doing. But you know, they're not going to keep it up the entire season. And so now that was the expectation. Darian Durant threw 21 touchdown passes. I believe he's only thrown 11 since. Correct me if I'm wrong. But that was the expectation. Now and this is where you're at. That's the reaction that is professional sports. It doesn't matter if it's the CFL, the Saskatchewan Roughriders, who have the great fan base that they do, or if it's the NFL and say the, Cleveland Browns, or the Jacksonville Jaguars, or even, the undefeated Kansas City Chiefs. That's what happens. The Kansas City Chiefs, just as a quick reference, they're 8-0 right now. If all of a sudden they go 4-4 down the stretch and finish up the season 12-4, are people going to be a little bit down on them? Yeah, because the expectation is 8-0. And while you don't exactly expect them to go 16-0, you expect them to maybe play a more consistent, stay on that consistent level and not drop right down. And that's sort of what has happened with the Saskatchewan Roughriders. So are they doomed? You look at it a few different ways. And I mean, the offensive play calling, it's a little bit interesting to me because, and here's why. You have Geroy Simon. He has the most receiving yards in CFL history. Arguably the best receiver in CFL history. Milt Stiegel may have a case, but that's another day and another topic. Why is he blocking? Why is Geroy Simon, a guy who has never had to block a day in his life, or at least as much as he has with the Saskatchewan Roughriders, why is he blocking? That makes no sense to me. I don't care if he's 38 years old. He can still play, and he can still go down the field and make a great route and make a big play for you, as he showed earlier in the season when he did get that opportunity. And you're using him as a blocker, and it doesn't make any sense to me. Would you rather have Geroy Simon blocking a defensive end or a linebacker or a blitzing corner, or would you rather have him catching passes? The no-brainer easy answer to me is you want to have him catching passes and not blocking those guys. Because as good as Leroy Simon is as a receiver, he's not that good of a blocker. And that's no slight to him. Why would he have to block? He's the best receiver of all time. Why would he have to block? He doesn't have to block. He's never had to block. Buono would make him block because Wally Buono knows his strengths and what he can use him with, his assets, and that's a receiver. And yeah, he is older, but he can still get it done as a receiver. And it just makes no sense to me as to why he's a blocker. And the same thing goes for Kory Sheets. After he had that blowout with George Cortez on the sideline, what does he do? He puts him as a blocker, and he gives up a sack. Now, granted, it wasn't all his fault. He still didn't get enough of that guy, and Darian Durant got sacked because of it. Would you rather have Kory Sheets blocking, or would you rather have Kory Sheets running the football? Again, he's second in the league in rushing, arguably the best running back in the league. I think it's John Cornish, but Kory Sheets certainly has his case. Why is he blocking instead of running the football? You get over yourself. Give him the football. And everything will be okay with the Saskatchewan Roughriders. They may not win the Grey Cup, but if you give the ball to Kory Sheets, you give the ball to your playmakers, you're going to have the best chance to do that. And right now, where they're standing, the Saskatchewan Roughriders are going absolutely nowhere. They're not even going to beat the BC Lions if this continues. I don't care how good of a defensive performance you have. If your offense is playing like they are, and granted they did win a game not too long ago, a couple weeks ago, where BC turned the ball over 7 times and the Saskatchewan Roughriders did not score a touchdown on their own. They were all turnover generated. But do you think that's going to happen again? That was Thomas DeMarco. That's a third-string quarterback. No slight to him. I think he has a good future if he works at it. But that's not Buck Pierce. That's not Travis Lulay, the former most outstanding player. Do you think that's going to happen on November 10th when the BC Lions go into Regina to play the Saskatchewan Roughriders? I don't. They might turn the ball over a couple times, but it's not going to be 7, I can guarantee you that. So, get Kory Sheets the ball. He's proven that he can do something with it. And, again, just to roll it back to the NFL, and I'm going to say this just because it's my favorite team in the NFL, the New England Patriots. In the game against the Miami Dolphins on Sunday, Stephen Reilly, their top running back, they benched him for the first quarter. Logan Ryan, one of their top rookie cornerbacks, they benched him for the first quarter. Stephen Reilly started to get a little bit more playing time. He started to make some plays. Second half, they both started the second half. They both stayed in the entire second half, virtually the entire second half for Stephen Reilly. Logan Ryan was in the second half. Logan Ryan makes a huge sack, a game-changing fumble. The Patriots score 14 points in a matter of seconds. Thanks to Stephen Reilly, he got the first touchdown. Thanks to Logan Ryan, he forced the fumble, which led to another touchdown. They win the game by 10 points. Get your best players in the game, do what they do best, and you'll have some success. So, that's about it. Saskatchewan Roughriders. On the other hand, the Calgary Stampeders, it's interesting to me because, and actually, we're not quite done here. We're going to go right back to this. The Calgary Stampeders turned the ball over 5 times. When is that ever going to happen again? They turned the ball over 5 times, and the Riders still couldn't win the game. And that goes right back to that offense and how badly they are struggling. That you force 5 turnovers on defense and you can't even win the game because your offense goes 2 and out and has to kick a field goal. I don't know. Something has to change for the Saskatchewan Roughriders, whether it's George Cortez's play calling or Darian Durant getting back to what he was doing earlier in the season, or they're not going to beat the BC Lions and make it back to Calgary, which Dwight Anderson guaranteed would happen. He guaranteed that they would get back to Calgary and would beat the Stampeders because, air quote, Calgary sucks. Clearly, Calgary doesn't suck. I mean, they're 14-3 and the best team in the league. Anyways, let's move on to the game before that. On Saturday, the Hamilton Tiger Cats and the Montreal Alouettes. Hamilton pulled it out. They were down 14-0 after the first quarter, but they rallied back on the strength of a 17-point fourth quarter to beat the Montreal Alouettes. And in that fourth quarter was when it happened. 4:43 left in the game. Brandon Banks, 107 yards. Goodbye. I think it was 24-19, maybe Montreal at that point. Hamilton got in front, didn't look back, shut it down on defense. And Troy Smith, who had he had a nice game, 23 of 39, 340 yards, touchdowns, 2 picks. The turnovers, as they do, hurt you. But, I think if Montreal can get that kind of offense in the playoffs, where they're at least moving the football, Tyrell Sutton had a 100-yard game on the ground. If they can get that kind of performance from their offense, they're going to be okay. They got one shot here against the Hamilton Tiger Cats in Guelph on the 10th. But if they get that kind of performance, look out. They could be the team that beats Hamilton. They could give Toronto a strong run. That's the super team in my mind to win the East. That kind of offensive performance, their defense is more than capable with Chip Cox, Kyrie Zebair, Marco Brulliette has had an outstanding season for the Montreal Alouettes. If they get that, their defense is going to take care of business, I tell you what. In that game, Hamilton, this is very interesting to me as well. CJ Gable, he's their most outstanding rookie nominee. He has had an absolutely great season as a whole. But you break it down and you wonder what Kent Austin and Tommy Condell are doing at times. I mean, it worked because they won. But if they didn't win, this is very susceptible to criticism. The guy had 2 carries in the game for -1 yards. Now, granted, Montreal does have the best defense in the league in terms of rushing the football. I believe they average 82 yards allowed per game, which is just outstanding when you factor in all the quarterbacks that can run in the Canadian Football League, not to mention the great running backs that we have up here. This is a guy who had over 300 yards in his 3 previous games, and then you give him the ball 2 times. Don't you think that you're going to have to run the ball more than 2 times to win in the playoffs? Obviously, that's not their entire rushing game, because Jeremiah Masoli had a package instilled just for him where he ran the ball 10 times in the game for 61 yards. He also threw 2 passes. One was a touchdown to CJ Gable. But doesn't that rush game have to come into play somewhere? You would think so anyways, wouldn't you? Can you really see a team winning the Grey Cup when they give their running back 2 carries a game? I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that package will work out just fine for them. But the Montreal Alouettes have seen it now. That's the other thing. They've seen it now. They know what it's all about. You're going to have some sort of huge reversal to throw something at them next time on the 10th here when you see them again, if you want to have a bunch of success with that package, don't you? You're going to have to run the ball with CJ Gable then. You're going to have to push it. And how about Henry Burris? He's struggling a little bit right now. I don't think he's thrown a touchdown in 5 of his last 6 games or something like that. Just hasn't been a good finish to the season there for Henry Burris, and you have to wonder if something's wrong with his arm or something like that, or if it's just a string of misfortune. I mean, at the same time, they're still 4-2 over that stretch, and you wonder how that's possible with such a pass-heavy team, but they are second place, so they will host the Montreal Alouettes on November 10th. We'll see how that game goes. Just a couple quick notes about the 2 games this past week. BC Lions, Buck Pierce, what's up? Did you see that performance that he had on Friday night? 11 of 14, 141 yards, 3 touchdowns in relief of Thomas DeMarco, who struggled, going 4 of 8, 60, and 1 touchdown. Threw clock back there. unbelievable performance for Buck Pearson, the winning effort for the BC Lions. Devin Logan had a huge game, 10 carries, 121 yards, and a touchdown, including a 54-yard romp for the BC Lions. Andrew Harris had 76 yards as well. 2 touchdowns receiving, 36 yards total in that regard for Andrew Harris, who is a nominee for the most outstanding Canadian player once again, but once again will likely lose to John Cornish when all is said and done. Mike Edmonton Eskimos was going back to BC once again, 20 of 34, 321 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 picks. Big receiver. I mentioned it earlier. This really amazes me with Adarius Bowman. If he was playing an 18-game schedule, he would be leading the league in yards right now. And it's even more fascinating when you look at it and you see who is that's Bowman and this huge receiver since coming back from injury, and they've still thrown the ball enough to Fred Stamps that he's been the leading receiver in the league. And we were talking about it with Mike earlier, how good this offense actually is. You know, they've struggled with their offensive line a little bit, but this offense just possesses a ton of skill players. Adarius Bowman, Fred Stamp, Shamad Chambers, Nate Kuhorn, Carlton Mitchell looked okay for them, 451 in that game. Marcus Henry, Kerry Koch. Now, obviously they're going to lose 1, maybe 2, 3 players to the Ottawa Redblacks possibly. I don't see why Ottawa wouldn't want to look at these guys. I mean, just numbers they put with Mike Reilly is truly incredible. So it might not be the exact same look next season, but with experience, with a full season under his belt, I think Mike Reilly is going to do some special things for that Edmonton Eskimos team. And, you know, if they get the proper leadership in there, I'm not sure if Kavis Reed is the guy that's going to lead him to a Grey Cup. But if they get something going there, they could be a pretty darn good sleeper team for next year to look out for. Obviously, it's tough to say that in a 9-team league, but, you know, is anybody going to expect the Edmonton Eskimos to have a huge run next year? Maybe not. So there you go. And then, of course, the first game of the week was the Toronto Argonauts in the Winnipeg. Mentioned you shake your head. I mean, Winnipeg did okay against the pass, and then that happens. 39 of 45, 5. Yeah, you know, he looked okay heading into the pass, doesn't he? Oh, Ricky Ray. It amazes me, Ricky Ray, how he continues to perform at the level he does. Truly, it does. I mean, he just goes in there and does his work every single game. And the stats he puts up are just ridiculous. So, yeah, Ricky Ray looks okay heading towards the playoffs here. Robbie Bryant came back from injury, had 7 receptions for 80 yards and 2 touchdowns. That's something to look for as you head towards the playoffs there. And the East Division Final hosting the Hamilton Tiger Cats or the Montreal Alouettes on November 17th. And a couple of weeks ago, we mentioned about Max Hall and how this was his time, his chance to seize the opportunity and get a spot for next year. And I think he's done a fairly good job, actually. I have been highly critical of Max Hall. I don't think he's the greatest arm strength. I don't think he has necessarily the greatest decision-making. He doesn't throw the greatest ball. But he's done well for himself in the past few weeks here, and he stayed healthy, stayed on the field. He has maintained himself. You know, he stayed poised. And I think that, you know, they're going to look pretty hard at maybe giving him a shot as the starting quarterback next year. And if he plays like he has, it wouldn't necessarily be a bad thing for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. You know, he's played very well in my eyes the past few weeks, and I've been truly impressed by Max Hall. And that's hard to say because I've been a huge criticizer of Max Hall and the Winnipeg Blue Bombers over the course of the season. So we'll see what happens there moving forward. Going to turn the ball over here, hand it off to the boys from SportsEh as they talk about the CIS. First round of the OUA playoffs over this past week. It was chalk. McMaster won. Guelph won. No upsets yet. But everybody else gets going up here this upcoming weekend as the CIS playoffs roll on and the run towards the Vanier Cup heats up as the other three conferences, get their post-season play underway. They'll break it down for you. They got some picks for you. They have a guest coming up here on the show, Nick Anapolsky. My apologies. Terrible on my behalf. Waterloo receiver coming up on the show. And their new feature, the Come On Man, coming up as well. James Katsuras, Patrick Yan, Zechary Miller. They did a great job for us last week. They'll do a great job for you again, as always. So we're going to turn it over to them. SportsEh.ca. Be sure to check them out. My name is Tyler Bieber, the host of the CFL side of things here. I hope you enjoyed the content tonight. Mike Reilly, I can't get over that. He was fantastic. What a guy to talk football with, I tell you. Just great insight into the game, into his career, into the season. Fantastic stuff from him. Okay, I'm out. We're turning it over to the SportsEh. You have yourself a fantastic evening. We'll see you next Wednesday where we take a look at the playoffs in the Canadian Football League and what's going to happen as we roll on towards Regina in the 101st Grey Cup.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second episode of the new Rouge Radio, a new division of SportsEh Media, your online hub for Canadian university sports, news, results, and insight. My name is James Katsuras. I am the chief editor of SportsEh, and I will be your host for this podcast, covering the latest in the CIS playoff race. Joining me is SportsEh CEO and former Toronto Varsity Blues offensive guard Patrick Yan, as well as Zechary Miller, who is the SportsEh VP, and is a former wide receiver for the McGill Redmen. So on today's show, we'll be covering all the playoff action in the CIS, including last week's OUA playoff action and everything to come this weekend. We'll go over the front runners for the CIS Coach of the Year award, and we'll also be talking to Waterloo Warriors wide receiver Nick Anapolsky. We'll be bringing him on the show just as we get to right after our OUA segment. So we'll be talking with Nick in a little while. But first, we're going to go over our CIS predictions for the playoffs and our former records for picks. So we were all pretty much status quo after last week. So as it stands, I finished the regular season on top. Guys, is there anything you have to say about that?
No comment here. I tried my best and it didn't work out.
So as you guys can see, I was the SAR when it came to that, and hopefully I'll be able to continue it in the playoffs as well. Okay, so speaking of the playoffs, let's start with the AUS. It was a scrambled division where anything could happen, but ultimately St. Mary's finishes on top, so they, of course, get the bye straight through to the Loney Bowl. So St. FX is the odd team looking in. They're out. So now it's Acadia and Mount Allison, a rematch of last week. Who do you like in this one, Pat?
I kind of like Mount Allison because of what they kind of have to offer here. Jordan Botel's coming off high, and I think the most important thing they kind of learned in the past game is if their quarterback could not turn the ball over, he's got a really good chance to win. So you got Botel coming back with 113 yards and a touchdown last week, and he's starting to get hot again. He's starting to look like his old form. So I think Mount Allison might take this one. James?
Do you think it's going to be a repeat of last week, Zach?
I'm going to have to say it is as well. Like Pat said, Botel has been on fire. 4 straight games over 100 yards rushing. I don't see why he can't do it again. And, I think Mount A will surprise and make it to the Loney Bowl to take on St. Mary's.
I think Mount A, other side of the ball, also needs some credibility here. They got 3 picks by Saunders, Sampson, and Ewan, and those are all big plays, James.
And we all know that winning football in the playoffs is playing strong defense and running the ball, and there might not be a better running back than Botel in the AUS, so they have a big advantage when it comes to that. Okay, so you guys both are taking the Mounties. I think I'm going to go with Acadia in this one. I disagree, but we'll see. We'll move on to the Canada West now, another division where it was very tight in the middle. Calgary, of course, ran away with it, but after Saskatchewan and Manitoba both won, because of head-to-head, Manitoba gets the home playoff game against Saskatchewan, and of course UBC lost against Calgary, so they get the rematch against them. lucky for them. So we'll start with Saskatchewan and Manitoba. What are your thoughts on this game, Zach?
I like Manitoba for sure in this one. Jordan Yance has been overlooked all season. He's one of the best quarterbacks in the CIS, I believe, and he's more than capable of getting the job done. 25 TDs, finishing first in the CIS. It's only 6 INTs, and he has over 2,400 yards. That's impressive. And then you have Coombs, obviously, who is the most versatile back in the league, and averaging 7.8 yards per carry. I think they can get the job done pretty easily here.
Zach likes the Bisons. Pat, what do you make of this matchup?
I definitely have to agree with Zach here. Coombs, he's over the century mark on rushing and catching the ball, and that's something that stands out.
Okay, so you guys are both going with the Bisons ahead of the experience of Saskatchewan with Burko, Buchanan, and Janke. Personally, I think I'm going to go with the Huskies in this one. I'm going to take the experienced team, and they play well on the road too, so I don't think it's going to phase them. We'll move on to the next matchup now, which is UBC and Calgary. Is there any discussion here, or is this one pretty much open and shut? What are your thoughts on that, Pat?
It's a rematch of last week, and last week UBC kind of got outplayed. It's going to be tough. It's going to be tough, James, but I think Calgary's going to win this one.
Zach, do you think there's any chance that UBC can take down the undefeated Dinos?
I don't know about take down, but they might give them a good game, maybe not get blown out. Calgary's going to take it, though. They just know how to get it done, and they've proven themselves all season.
Although I like what Deschamps brings to the table, I think he's one of the best running backs in the CIS. I have to agree with you guys on this one. It'd be foolish to pick against Calgary at this point. Okay, so we'll move on to the RSEQ now, and surprise, surprise, Sherbrooke was a very big disappointment early on, but a lot of that could be attributed to their record. But now they're in the playoffs. I mean, they got a playoff date against Laval, which is, pretty much, suicide for anybody, but at least they got in. So what do you guys make of that matchup?
It's going to be tough for them. Laval's going to be playing at home. It's a tough environment. Laval's got the best defense in the CIS, and it's going to be a long day for the war.
Zach, your McGill-Redmond, it looked as if they had it for 1 point, but on the last day of the season, they lose, and they're out of the playoffs. So the team that overtook them is Sherbrooke. Do you think they have a chance of overthrowing the juggernaut Laval Rouge?
Well, it's obviously sad to see the Redmen get out to the playoffs. They couldn't make that step this year, and I was hoping this would be the year, but I really don't think it'll matter in the end. Laval is pretty much taking this semifinal game with ease if it was McGill or Sherbrooke. They dominated Sherbrooke twice this season already, and they're going to do it at home again. It's going to be a three-peat, James. They're going to do it in front of a sold-out crowd.
I think that's an obvious one, going with Laval. But the next one really intrigues me. I think it's maybe the tastiest matchup in this round of the playoffs. You got Montreal, who's a dominant defensive team, and then you got Bishops, the surprise team this year, with a Heck Crichton, potential, quarterback in Jordan Heather and all these other weapons that they have. So I'm going to give you guys the unenviable task of picking a winner here. Pat, who you got?
I'm kind of torn here, James, but I think I got to go with Montreal because of their pass rush. Even though Heather's only gotten sacked 15 times this year, which is not a large amount for a smaller quarterback in the league, I don't think he'll be able to escape Montreal. I just don't see it.
Pat going with the defense in playoff time. Zach, you agree?
I'm going to have to disagree there, James. It's a tough matchup, hard to pick, but I think Montreal has fallen off since the start of the season. Their offense have been sporadic at best. Bishops has that offensive firepower. They have Heather, who's now the CIS record holder. They have Alex Fox, who is just a deep threat like no other in the CIS, and they're playing at home. So Bishops thrives in that environment, and I think that offensive firepower is just going to carry them through.
Let's talk about Fox for a second. Fox right now leads the CIS in touchdowns with 12. He's first in yards as well with 1,009, and he's first with yards per game with 126 yards per game. Like, that's a special player right there. He's special.
And that's exactly why I think Bishops at home, they're dangerous. They can do a lot of damage to a Montreal defense that has looked good, but I think that offensive firepower is just too much.
But are you talking about the offensive receivers and weapons right now? Or are you looking at the offensive line? Because looking at that matchup, it's going to be a different story, I think.
I also think you do factor in the offensive line, but the playmaking skills of Jordan Heather, he knows how to move in the pocket, make the throws downfield. And I really think that Bishops will be able to get it done even though there's pressure. They've taken it to Montreal. They played Montreal at the beginning of the season. The first half was a tight game. They fell apart in the second half. And I think it's going to be a great matchup nonetheless.
My short answer is I'm going to go with Montreal on this one. I'm going to go with defense, but Bishops can very well prove me wrong. So now we're going to move on to the OUA playoffs. We have wide receiver Nick Anapolsky standing by. We're going to bring him in a couple of minutes, but first we're going to look at the OUA playoff implications. First of all, Mac beats Ottawa and Guelph beats Windsor last week. Was that unexpected to either of you?
I think it was expected. The teams at home win. I thought Ottawa would come out with a bit more firepower there. Colvin looked distressed. The offensive line didn't look that great. Galanderson looked that great. I don't know. Something didn't click last week for the GGs, and it's going to be the last game some of those guys play, so it's disappointing.
To me, I just feel like they didn't run Galanders enough. Colvin definitely looked injured out there, and they didn't use their fifth-year running back enough, but Mac and Guelph were the obvious ones there. Okay, so we'll move on to this week's playoff matchups in the OUA. So, of course, the big one, the big rematch, and the teams that just can't seem to get out of each other's way over the last couple of seasons, Guelph and Queens. They're playing at Richardson Stadium. Queens, had the upper hand last time they played Guelph in the regular season. So what do you guys make of this matchup?
I'm going to have to go with Queens. A clear cut for me. I think it's going to be a good game as usual. Both teams will compete. But being at the Guelph game last week against Windsor, they let Windsor hang around. They turned over the ball. Guelph, their turnovers will kill them, I think, again. Queens has a great defense that creates turnovers. They know how to get the ball back for their offense, and they're going to come out firing after a week off. And I think they just really want that rematch against Western as well.
I think last time they played, you could take a lot from that game. Jazz Lindsay, he threw 3 picks. The DB core of Queens is something that's special and something that you'll really just see once every few years. You got Chase, you got Lou, you got Webster, you got a bunch of really good, solid senior players who are ready to explode. And especially Lou, I think he's going to be a difference in this game. You quote me.
Fair enough. I got Queens in this one as well. And then the last playoff game we're going to talk about, and right after we'll bring on Nick Anapolsky, is, of course, the number 1 ranked Western Mustangs and their unstoppable offense against the veteran McMaster Marauders. Who do you guys have in this game?
Well, James, I'm gonna take Western. They've been the powerhouse of the CIS this year. The OUA so far, but their stats prove to be some of the best in the CIS. They blew out Mac, obviously, in national television earlier this season. I don't think Mac is going to give it up that easy this time, but Western, they just have that. They have the defense. They have the offense. Mac is healthier now, so they're going to compete, but Will Finch, you got Yannick Carew in the backfield. These guys can make plays, and Western just knows how to get it done at this point, so I think they're going to do it.
Does Coach Patashik have any magic left in him?
Well, yeah, I don't think it's fair to put it all on him. You got a young quarterback who's not as experienced in Ferguson, but at the same time, you look at the score. You look at the score of the last game. It was 58 Western, 15 McMaster, and I don't know, 18 of those points came in the fourth quarter by Western, just laying the pain. After the fact, they already knew they were going to win. Western's a team like that, and I feel like it might happen again just because Western's had a week off. They've had more time to prep for these guys. They're a bigger, explosive offense than we've known, and I feel like they'll definitely take this game, James.
I think McMaster's only chance is if they're amazing secondary, if they're all healthy, and if they're all playing on top of their game. Steven Ventresca's been amazing. Cupido, if he's back healthy, well, he was playing last week, so as long as, he's stronger this week, and Mike Daly, of course, that's the only chance they have as far as I'm concerned.
They're quiet, though, James. They're quiet as a secondary this year.
So we'll see what happens there. All right, so that does it for us in terms of the playoff talk, in terms of what's going to happen this week. And, of course, as promised, we have wide receiver Nick Anapolsky who's going to be coming on the show, who we're going to talk to a bit about his record-breaking season, as well as Waterloo's struggles this year. So we'll be bringing on Nick shortly, and we're going to discuss some of these things. All right, so we are now here with Waterloo Warriors All-Canadian wide receiver Nick Anapolsky. Nick, how you doing, man? Thanks for coming on the show.
Hey, good. Thanks for having me on. How you doing?
We're doing good. First of all, with the playoffs coming around, it's always tough to see some of the better players, not in the playoff picture. You're a guy we would all obviously love to see playing in the playoffs because, you dominate in the regular season. But having said that, I was wondering what your thoughts are on how the season unfolded for you guys. You went in with a bit of promise, and you just, couldn't really figure things out on, either side of the ball, especially on defense.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's hard to watch playoffs this time of year. Obviously not the season we were hoping for. We really thought we had a playoff shot this year. Things just didn't work out. It just didn't go our way. Certain games started off rocky, and we're not really a team that come from behind very well. We kind of have to strike early, which I don't know. That was the game plan. It didn't really work out. So it's definitely tough to watch the playoffs and stuff. But at the same time, your body starts to heal up and stuff too. So I mean, there's advantages to it as well. You kind of get to train earlier and whatnot after the season. So other than that, it is tough to watch.
How tough was it playing in a situation where there wasn't all the time, that stability at the quarterback position where, you had one guy in, one guy out? And how were you still able to be productive?
Yeah, that was another tough thing about this season. I mean, we had Brian Christ, who's our starter and our go-to guy, the gunslinger, and he got put out first game. So that gave a chance for Jamie to come in, which he did really well the first two games that he got to start. He came in for Carleton the game, and we won that game. He played really well. But I mean, and then the back and forth after that it's tough for receivers and stuff to get into momentum with both the quarterbacks. But they both have different characteristics and different skills that made them both great. But if we could have put them both together, it would have been that makes one heck of a quarterback.
Nick, last year you were a first-team All-Canadian. You had amazing numbers, 63 catches, 871 yards, 5 touchdowns. This year, you outdid yourself. You had a CIS record, 74 catches, along with 683 yards and 3 touchdowns. Which season are you more proud of? And did you envision that you would have a shot at the receptions record? Was it something you thought about? Did you even know when you got it that you had it?
I was aware there's people on the sidelines telling me about it this year, but I don't know. Last year I had almost 150 more yards with less catches. So to me, that feels like I was a little more productive. But at the same time, with a season like that last year, I knew I was going to get more coverage on me, some double coverage, and some bracketing stuff on the boundary side. So I mean, it made it a little bit tougher this year. So to be able to get the numbers that I still had I felt like somewhat satisfied with it. But at the same time, I feel like I could have done more. Yards after the catch was tough this year too. A lot of the screens that I had last year that I broke for big plays, I didn't get to do this year because teams are ready for it. But at the same time, this year was fairly successful for me. The catches record, that's not something I was really striving for. I mean, that's just how many times the coach is going to call my number. I don't know. I could have used a little more yards, and I'd like to get some more scoring opportunities. But at the same time, with how our team did, it wasn't too bad.
Nick, you're a competitive guy, and we know that you like to you do go up against the top defensive backs from other teams. We saw you against Laurier, against Felix Odom. You guys were going back and forth. Who would you say is the guy that gives you the most trouble, or you most look for going up against?
I don't know. To me, going up against different guys isn't something that I concern myself with each week. A lot of people are film guys and they watch techniques and I'm going against this guy this week. For me, I have the mentality where I go in against anybody and it's the same no matter what. No matter who I'm going up against, whether the guy has 10 interceptions that season or 0, or he's the best in the league or he's not. For me, it doesn't really matter. I go in with the same mentality that I'm going to win every one-on-one battle that I have. But with saying that, Felix did put up a good fight in And I like the guy as a person. We train together and stuff too, and he was a competitor this year. So I mean, that game was tough for me as well.
Nick, what does Waterloo have to do to turn things around?
We got to get some more recruits in here, some younger guys that are coming in and ready to battle right away. I mean, we got guys coming in that are developing over years, but I mean, we need to get some top recruits that are going to come in and step in right away. Other than that, I mean, we got the coaches in the spot. I mean, we got the right guys. We got the right attitude. We got the support with our school, and it's tough to say. I mean, we've been in a slump ever since that steroid scandal and stuff, and it's hard to get out of. But I mean, you got to keep fighting. Coach Powell has brought up this mentality this year that we got to be an ant, which means we got to keep fighting no matter what happens. There's always got to find a way. You got to go around obstacles and whatnot. You always got to find a way, and that's what our team has to do at some point.
What would you tell those recruits to bring them to Waterloo? Why Waterloo?
Mainly the coaching staff is number one. I mean, Joe Powell, the guy, he's the best coach I've had by far. He's a second father figure to me. He's going to tell you how it is. He's going to build your character, not only a football player, but your overall character as a person. He's got the backup staff to do it as well. Waterloo, it's one of those schools where are you going to come into a program that's already winning, or are you going to come into something special and try and change the program and turn it around, which I tried to do when I came in first year. So I'm not regretting any decisions that I made to come here, and that's probably what I would tell them.
Nick, I know this is a bit of a difficult one, but right now, if I asked you, who do you feel is the man for the job at quarterback, Brian Chris or Jamie Cook?
They're both tough workers and stuff, and I've had more chemistry with Brian just because I've been with him longer, and he's got the deep ball, which I love to try and get downfield. So I'd probably have to go with Brian just because he's our starter and he's the guy. He's always been the guy, and as soon as he's gone, Jamie's going to be the guy. So it's going to be his time to shine next year.
And Nick, finally, what are your goals after Waterloo? Do you want to play in the CFL? And if so, how are you training for that in the off season?
Yeah, right now I'm just trying to get back into the swing of things with training and stuff. So I'm going to do that and try and get ready for hopefully get invited to the Dwayne Ford Combine. I'm going to go there and try and show my stuff again. And that's the same week as the E-Camp. So if I can do that, get my name back on the radar, I know my agent's working hard for me to try and get the same opportunity. And then if that doesn't work out, I'm looking at going to play in Europe maybe. So I just want to try and play pro somewhere for a little bit. I want to get paid for playing the game I love just for one time and see how that goes. But definitely CFL still is my dream and my goal. And if not, I'm going to go to Europe. And if I don't do that, last case scenario is to have another year of eligibility, see what happens from there.
Nick, if you were to play in the CFL, what kind of a role would you envision yourself playing as an undersized player?
I play the role as a smaller guy who's willing to fight. I'll compete against anybody out there kind of thing, and I want to be the guy that can be counted on to catch the ball in tough plays and stuff like that. So just the guy that you can count on. You got to get a first down, and it's 2nd and 2, 2nd and 3. Who's going to fight for those yards? Give me the ball. I'm going to do that. I don't see myself being the huge playmaker right away, throwing the deep balls and stuff. Obviously, there's guys out there faster than me and that kind of thing. But I'm going to be the sure-handed, clutch receiver that you can give the ball to when you need the play to be done.
Nick, how realistic is it for us to see you in a fifth and final year in the Gold and Black?
I actually have no idea where I'm heading right now. Finishing up school is number one for me right now. I'm in my last 3 classes. And then this winter, I'm going to see how training goes and whatever I get a look at. I'm not making any decisions at this point just because I'm leaving my options open. But it's definitely in the back of my mind.
Well, if you do decide, they'll hear it on SportsEh first, we hope.
Yeah.
Nick, thanks so much for taking the time to do this. We appreciate it. Best of luck, whatever it is you decide to do. We're going to be rooting for you, and we look forward to watching you play on Saturdays, Sundays, whenever it is.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
No problem. Take care, man.
All right, bye-bye.
Okay, the final segment of our show is Come On, Man. So we're going to go around the table here. We'll start off with Zach. Zach, what you got for us, buddy?
Well, it's the end of the season, and you see a lot of teams struggling, but none more than I think the Alberta Golden Bears. 0-8 2 seasons in a row. Their defense was the worst in the CIS. Just as bad as the Carleton Ravens, 632 yards a game against. Worst rushing defense, 2-22 in the last 3 seasons. Come on, man.
I'm going to go with Regina Rams quarterback Cayman Shutter. 5 interceptions last game. He came with a lot of promise this season, but as did the Rams, they weren't able to get it done. But that's a season-ending clunker for him. We know he's better than that. So for me, that's my come on, man. All right, well, that does it for us today. That's all we have for you here at Rouge Radio. Check out sportseh.ca for up-to-the-minute news and opinion on CIS and high school sports. We want to thank Nick Anapolsky for coming on the show. That was a great segment with him. And we look forward to chatting with you all again same time next week. So that does it for us, and have a great day out there, everyone.